Thank you all for joining me today. We're going to do some handles. And we're going to go from the very beginning, going from the formation and pulling of the handles, and then attachment, and then cleanup. I'm going to go over some tools first before we get started. I have these two loop tools, trim tools, that I use to create the slugs to start with, and one of them is a Dolan tool or a Kemper tool, and this is also a Kemper tool. They both work great for just creating large tubes of clay that you can start with. I'm going to use an extra sharp needle tool. This is much finer than the one that comes in your regular beginner's pottery kit. This is a rubber chisel tool, I suppose. It's flexible, and you can use it for cleaning up handle junctions. And then I have a cheese cutter without the wheel going across, and we'll show you why I use this in a minute. So I also have two sponge corners. One of them, the one that's in better condition, is for cleaning up, and the one that is a little more beat up is used for wetting, applying water to the handle in the mug, instead of dipping the handles into water itself. So I'm going to start out, I'm going to use a fresh 25-pound block of clay. And I also have my postal scale here, which I'll show you I have. I find it super useful to weigh out. Great. What diameter Kemper? It's about the size of about a nickel. It's maybe, yeah, it's about a nickel, between nickel and quarter. I think it's the biggest one that they make. So I'm going to use my scale, which is still functioning, thank God, to weigh out the clay. And I like starting out with a fresh block of clay because it's long, and so I can get a long slug out of it instead of having to cut up a bunch, and which creates waste. So I'm going to take my tool, and I'm going to start in the corner. I'm just going to go in, make sure that all edges of the tool are inside the clay, and just go straight down, keeping them in the clay to the bottom. Then I'm going to peel back both corners. I'm just going to extract it, pull the tool out, and I have this big, nice blank. Instead of using an extruder, this is my faster way of doing it. I'll do one more for kicks. I'm going to go right next to it, making sure that I don't erupt from this edge. And you can kind of see the tool move through as you go, as you watch it, and pull out at the bottom, roll this back, and then I've got this lovely, perfect slug. So I'm going to yes, I'm recording. Thank you, guys. Okay, so we have my scale here. I'm going in grams because that's what I understand. I don't know what it translates to in ounces. Take my cheese cutter tool, and I'm going to measure out. We'll do a few different ones. I'm going to start with let's do a 75, an 85, and a 95 gram piece of clay. So I'm just going to start with one here. I think this is probably about 75 grams. I'll weigh it 76 grams. Hey, not bad. Let's do one that's a little bigger than that. This one is 96. That's going to be a big one. And then this one is 90. Let's go down to 85. It's 80 grams. I'll do one more. Let's go. 86. Okay, cool. So I got these 4 slugs. Usually I will, if I'm making a batch of 12 mugs, I'll make 14 or 16 just so I have extras. And it's always good to have extra handles laying around. And I'll show you how I keep my handles wet over long periods of time. So done with the scale. Okay, so okay. So let's start with one of the smaller ones. I'll try to give you guys two angles of how I do this. So this is what it looks like right now. I'm gonna make it nice and perfect before I start forming it. I'm gonna roll the ends on the table so they're nice and smooth. I'm gonna go like this, roll sides, and do it one more time so the edges are not sharp. So I have fairly consistent piece of clay. Then, okay, now we're gonna do the forming of it. This is where the magic happens with 2 thumbs and 2 index fingers. I'm gonna start about 1/3 of the way up the handle, and I'm gonna start wiggling it and pushing down. And as you push down, it creates your attachment point. And I'm gonna progressively go down further and further, pinching it as I go, and then go back up. And then I'm gonna go up to about 2/3 of the way up. So I have a 2/3 pinched handle, and I'm gonna flip it over. And where the pinching on the other side stopped, I'm gonna use that to wiggle down and create my other attachment point and go down further progressively. So I have a flared base and a flared top. And as I do this, you see we had these two this sharp ridge here and the sharp ridge on the back. I'm gonna get rid of these because they get in the way during the pulling section. So I'm just gonna use my 2 fingers and pinch that back as I go up. Now I'm gonna do it again. So I'm gonna start from the bottom and go up again, making this even thinner. You don't want it super thin because if it's too thin, it's difficult to pull, and you often end up tearing the handle when you pull it. And you want to be careful not to make it too thin on the sides, too sharp on the sides, because that can be problematic when you're pulling it as well. And it's also, this is a big sheet of nice grade plywood, and it's really good because it's absorbent and it holds the handle to it, but also releases if you pull up, and you can see there's a little water mark left over. So I'm gonna go again up, and this, every time I do this, it creates that ridge line. And so I'm gonna go back. So there's, again, I'm gonna go back, and I'm gonna get rid of this, push it back down. Okay, so that's more or less the first step to get it into the shape that I want. Then I'm going to make sure that the ends look more or less symmetrical and in a diamond shape. So this is a little funky. I'm gonna set it down, looking down on it, make sure there's no sharp points, making sure it's just symmetrical and congruent. So we have one end, the other, they're more or less congruent. Then I'm gonna roll them on the table. Now I'm not pushing down at all, I'm just kind of letting I'm pushing down a tiny bit, but I'm mostly just letting the weight of the handle create this bevel. And you'll see why that's important later. It's gonna get destroyed in a little bit when I pull it, but it helps for holding on to the handle. Okay, so that's one blank. We'll do another one. Let's do this is the 95 gram piece of clay. I'm gonna make a couple handles with enormous attachment points because I really like that style where the handle is thin in the middle and then there's 2 really fat attachment points. So let's prep this one by rolling out both ends. Oh shoot, where's my chat? Cool, okay. Rolling out both ends, then roll to smooth it out a bit. Okay, now we're gonna start about 1/3 of the way up, and then I'm gonna wiggle and push down as I push in with my fingers. We're gonna make a really big attachment point here. So I'm really trying to get a lot of clay below my fingers. This is gonna be huge, and I'm going kind of up and down So you can see a very large attachment point right there. I'm going to go up. Okay, and I'm about 2/3 of the way up. I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing, pushing down. Getting a really big attachment point here. Okay, I'm going to wiggle it loose from the table, watermark. So I have this, let's compare it to the other one. So this is significantly bigger. Get rid of my ridge lines. And then go back and start over. And I'm just trying to make a gently kind of oval shape in the middle. So if you cut this in half, there'll be sort of an oval, not a diamond. Flip it over, make sure everything is happy, make sure it's symmetrical. Okay, and then I'm gonna look at the ends and I'm gonna make sure that they are in a general diamond shape that I want. Symmetrical and congruent. And you don't have to do this, but this is how I like my attachment points. You can leave them round. I'm going to roll them. So there's a little bit of clay sticking up. That's no big deal. There we go. So that's 2. Let's do 2 more. If you guys have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat window and I'll answer them as we go. So starting 1/3 of the way up, pushing down, making my base thick, and going up as I go about 2/3 of the way up, and then flip it over, wiggle and push down, creating thick base, and then forming it into a diamond shape, making sure it's still stuck to the table, going back up the way I came to the other end, getting rid of the ridge line. Forming a diamond shape on top, diamond shape on the bottom, and then rolling them out a little bit. I'm actually gonna make this one a little thinner. This is gonna be, if you leave it thick, it'll be hard to pull into the shape that you want. So starting with it fairly thin, not too thin, but just not unnecessarily thick will make it a lot easier to pull it. It's still fine to have it thick. It just takes a lot longer to pull it in general. Here's the last one. All right, so okay, last one we're gonna do. We're gonna start 1/3 of the way up, wiggle down, get a pretty good size attachment point, squeeze together in diamond shape as I go up to about 2/3 of the way, flip it over, and then where the pinching ends, I'm gonna use that to wiggle down. Let's make a really wide one on this. Get rid of the ridge line, flip it over. Squeeze it, and then, so this is longer than the other one, so this is gonna be a little thinner in the middle. So not too thick, not too thin. Okay, I'll show you guys when I start pulling how this ridge line will sort of reappear but then disappear. Can roll it out, just using the weight of the handle to create these two bevels for holding on to. Cool, so I got my 4 slugs here. Okay, now we're going to start the pulling. And normally when you pull, you're going to dip the whole handle into the water and then pull. But we're not going to do that because we're going to try to keep the ends as dry as possible. And you'll see why in a minute. So I've got my water here. I'm also going to try to keep my table clean and dry as I need it to be dry to release the handles once I go about forming them. So I'm going to dip 3 fingers, just these 3 fingers in the water. I'm going to wet the handle and keeping the bottom and the top dry. Stand to do this. So I'm just going to wet the handle. I'm mostly using my thumb here to get rid of all the finger marks that are left over from pinching. So you can still see there's a little bit of like rippling in here. I'm going to just use my thumb to get rid of that. Holding in my left hand the handle as gently as possible, because if you hold it tight, if you grab onto it, you're going to smash the top, and you want to preserve the shape that you made initially. You guys see okay? Can I get a thumbs up if you can see okay? Great, okay, thank you. Okay, so now in doing that and getting rid of the thumb marks, I've sort of recreated these ridges. I'm going to try to get rid of them. You can actually leave one of them if you want, and I find if you leave one, it should be on the inside of the handle so that there is, it fits the creases in your fingers right here. But I'm going to get rid of them on this one using my thumb mostly to smash it back down. So the handle is more round than pointed. The same on the other side. Dipping my fingers when it gets dry or less slippery. Using my thumb most. Okay, now that I have the handle mostly round and smooth and with no ridge on it, I'm going to use my 2 fingers. I'm going to get them wet. I'm going to start pulling the handle like this, and I'm letting go as I get down towards the end. So I'm really just applying pressure in here. So we're maintaining the thickness of the top and the bottom. I'm going to try. I am not always pulling. Ideally, I'm always pulling from the same end, but oftentimes I end up flipping it, and you'll see that in a minute. So let's see how far I can get before I have to flip it. So I'm going to try to be gentle, but also create length. I'm also going to rotate it so I'm not creating any inconsistent like waviness. Sometimes if you pull from one side, it'll be bent from one side, and we don't want that. Okay, let's keep going this side. So I'm also gonna, there's a lot of material in here that I can use to pull into the handle, so I'm gonna do that a little bit. Now I'm gonna flip it. And the risk with flipping it is that it's wet down here, and I'm gonna try to keep my fingers dry, because my fingers are dry, they hold on better. If my fingers get wet, then I have to grab harder, which often deforms the handle. So I try to make sure that I keep it straight. I'm not pulling off to one side, switching to my these two fingers to sort of smooth it out. Getting the length we want. This is about as long as I want it. And you can inspect the bend that we have. Be pretty good. We can, yeah, let's go with this. So now I'm going to set it on the table. And this is the part where it's important to have a dry table, because if you stick this on a wet table or a wet spot, it's just going to get stuck. So dry my fingers off. I'm going to wiggle it down so it attaches to the table a little bit, but not too much. And then wiggle this side down. And then I'm going to use my fingers to form and to get rid of, there's a bump here and a bump here, and also one corresponding on the insides. I'm going to get rid of those with my fingers, and I'll show you the motion. And on the next handle, I'll do it facing this way so you can see. So I'm going just back and forth, smoothing out the lump. Do the same on the bottom. And when you do this yourself, you'll see how much of a difference it makes. And the longer you do it, the smoother it'll get. And the more shapely it will become. Okay, now for the, I think this is pretty good. This will be a good shape. I'm gonna clean my fingers off on a sponge. Now here comes the magic part. If I can release it, wiggle it back and forth. If it's dry, it will release. You don't want to be violent with it, because if you're violent, it'll deform the handle and you'll have to go back and do more later. I think this end is going to need to be scraped off. I'm going to grab a little rib and just gently just push it, and it should come off. It'll release. And right now, I'm not worried about finger marks or anything. We'll get rid of those later. You see that is our handle for now. I can set this aside. I have a box with a piece of plaster in the bottom, and it's just a plastic storage box, and I store all my handles on there so that they stay wet until I need them. Let's do another one. Clean my hands off, especially the hand that's holding the handle, which in my case is the left hand. It's got to be as dry as possible. I grab this guy, wetting my fingers, wetting the handle. Using my thumb to get rid of the pinch marks from before, trying to not get my table wet. Flip it around, holding it gently with my top hand. How do I avoid getting it too thin in the middle while pulling? That is just practice. You have to sort of listen to what the clay wants to let you do. And you know, occasionally I'll make one too thin and I'll just throw it out and start over. But it also starts out with how thick your handle is when you make the slug, or when you make the blank. If it's too thin, it's really easy to pull it even thinner, and that will cause you to have a thin spot in the handle. And which is why I said earlier, if I'm making 12 mugs, I'll make 16 handles in case I mess up 4 of them. I have extras to work with. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of the lines, the ridges that I created again with my thumb, just pushing them down, trying to make a rounder shape. Okay, now I'm going to start using my 2 fingers to pull down. This is where we're lengthening the handle. I think part of the answer to that last question of how to not get it too thin is this section. Don't be aggressive. Just do what the clay will let you do and listen to it. So this creates this ridge here. I need to get rid of this. This is not symmetrical. So I'm gonna use my thumb just to sort of massage it down and to form the clay back into a consistent shape. So now I have, that's what I'm looking for. Go back to pulling it gently. And also if you have a spot that's thin, like this spot is getting a little thin right here, I can just flip it over and start pulling the other side and get length from there. And that way you're not risking pulling too much on the same spot if it's already too thin. Get my fingers wet. And you're increasing pressure, releasing pressure as you get down. So increase, release. That's important. That's part of listening to the clay and hearing what it'll let you do. Okay, how are we looking? So that's a little thick. I might want to go a little thinner than that. Let's pull it a few more times. Okay, let's do that. So I'm gonna put it down the table. Okay, let's do it this way. Let's rotate so you guys can see. So I'm just gonna, oh yeah, let's actually do this. So you can see there is a lump here and the lump under here and then down here as well. So we're gonna make this nice and smooth. Setting the handle down on both sides, and we have to wiggle this one down so that it contacts evenly. Then we're just going to go like this, getting rid of the lump here. I'm just pushing in, and then there's one on the underside that corresponds to it. I think this is one of the really important parts of handle making. I used to make handles without doing this. It was essentially the same process, but without doing this. And I would just cut off the part that didn't look good with a knife. And I would lose the handle mass, which wasn't great. If you look at my older work, you'll see handles that don't really have this fat attachment point on them. And I feel like having that really large attachment point is really desirable in my opinion, and it adds a lot of grace to the mug as well. Okay, that's pretty good. I like that. I'm gonna clean my hands off on my sponge. That's just damp. Try to release this, moving back and forth. That one came off nice and easily. Let's see if this one rolls well. Excellent. Then take 2 fingers, put it under and pick it up. Okay, that's an ideal release. Then I'll show you how this looks. It will look. So something like that. And you can see all the finger marks, and we're just not going to worry about those right now. Those are totally okay. I'll show you what happens when we go back to clean it up in a bit. Can I get y'all to give me an answer? Do you want me to do 1 more or 2 more handle pulls? Would that be helpful? Thumbs up, thumbs down, or yes? I'm getting 1 yes. More yeses. Carrie. Okay, great. Cool. Can you show us up close what your fingers are doing in the first part? Yes, I can do that. Okay, clean my table off. I often use my scraper to clean off any clay that I've left on there. Typically, the table will dry off pretty well in between handles. I also use the table to dry my fingers because it's absorbent. So I have nice dry fingers now. Okay, so I grab my blank, dip my fingers in the water. And let's see. So thumb is going to be doing most of the work. Getting rid of all of the ridges. All these little ridges that are the result of the pinching process. So that's the first step, get rid of the ridges with your thumb. And if there's anything else that you don't like on your handle, this is a great time to get rid of it. You can just push it down gently. I'm holding the back of it with my index finger. It's not really doing much. It's just kind of holding the handle in place. Flip it over. Pulling down with my thumb. Ella, what do you mean by how wide is it? Fingers wet again. Yes, I'm only smoothing it, not lengthening it. Exactly. Just getting it to look happy so it's in a good place to be lengthened. And so I'm really just cleaning up any stuff that's not cool from the process of pinching it. And you can actually, maybe we should try this. I'll show you guys an entirely pinched handle, which I don't do, but I think they can look cool. Okay, so this is where I want it. So no ridge, nice and smooth on both sides. I'm gonna start pulling it with my fingers. And remember, not holding it too tight with this hand. If you hold it real tight, you'll just smash it. We want to maintain the shape, this shape as much as possible. Although we will go back and reshape it later. It's just better to have it where you want it in the first place. Let's keep going on this side. You see I'm going out at the bottom, so I'm not smashing down. I think it'll get thin. If you maintain pressure down here, you're gonna make a thin spot here because you're just pulling down where there's a lot of resistance right down here where it's thick. So you want to avoid that. Okay, keep going. Okay, now I'm gonna flip it, wipe off my hand, use my thumb a little bit just to clean up contours and go back to pulling. I'm really trying to get some length here. Let's get a little dry. I'm still being careful not to smash the top of the handle with my left hand as it holds the handle. Flip it around so I'm not doing anything incongruent. So we look at it like this. There's a little bit of a curve here and a little straight here, so I'm gonna try to straighten that out. It's better to have a straight handle from the beginning than it is to straighten out the handle once it's already on the mug. That's definitely a pitfall, and oftentimes the handle, when fired, will re-warp, and you want to have a straight handle because wavy handles are not really cool, in my opinion. Okay, get it nice and thin. I do like thick attachment point with a thin handle. Not too thin, but I think the contrast between thin and thick is really nice. Using like this to make the edges happy. How are we looking there? It's pretty good. Let's go a little thinner. Okay, let's keep that now. Gonna set it down on the table. Is the width defined when you are pinching, thumb smoothing, or thinning? The width of the attachment point is defined when I am pinching it into shape. The width of the pulled part of the handle is defined when I'm pulling it, and you can make it thinner or thicker depending on how you pull it. So I'm just going back and forth, using my thumbs to push on the inside and my index fingers on the outside, smoothing away any weirdness. Now the bottom of this is actually pretty funky. It's kind of, there's like a lump here and a lump here. So I'm gonna set it down as straight as I can in relation to itself. And I'm trying to maintain the diamond shape of the attachment point, and I'll show you guys what that looks like in a second once I release this. Clean up my fingers. Okay, I'm gonna wiggle gently. Comes off. Wiggle this one gently. It comes off. Pick up with my 2 fingers. Set it on the sponge so you guys can see. Normally I don't set it on a sponge, but this is just for the purpose of this demo. So there you go. So you can make this thinner here if you want. So you have a kind of a sharp edge. If you have a groggy clay, that's not a good idea because the glaze often doesn't cover the sharpness, and it's really uncomfortable to hold. You'll have nice sandpaper going on. But this is how the bottom still looks. So I didn't smash it while holding it as I was pulling it, and I even if I did, I can reform it while I'm doing the this last step. So I'm gonna call that one good. All right, let's do one more. I'm gonna do just pinched. I've never actually done this on one of my mugs, but it's fun to try. So got my pinch handle here. I'm gonna wiggle it down so it's attached to the table. I'm really gonna start pinching, and I'm also like rotating it this way as I pinch. Oops. I may have to reattach it occasionally. And then just get some water. Okay, and as I pinch, I'm gonna let it kind of flop over, and then flip my fingers. I'm really working on making a nice diamond shape here on the bottom. Flip my fingers. This way. So this is kind of like a really fat 1-finger handle, and I'll show you guys what that looks like. So you can smooth it out and make it much more delicate than this, but that is definitely one way to make a handle without pulling it. And it'll, there's a little bit of cracking on the edges, but you can just smooth that over with a sponge or your finger, and you can either leave the ridge line or get rid of it just by pinching it. But like I was saying earlier, having the ridge line on the inside is kind of nice because it fits your finger in a way in this first, what's it called? Anyone know? First crease. So yeah, so that's a fun thing to mess around with. I don't ever do it, but it's fun. Okay, let's get to attaching some handles. Let me grab my partially dried ones. So I pulled these yesterday in preparation for this, and I usually just fan dry them so they set up when I need to use them instead of letting them air dry at their own pace. So yeah, so okay, let's find one that fits. I have a fairly large mug here. I don't like having a really big space in here. I feel like that's kind of cumbersome. What I do like is a narrow space that fits the handle, the shape of the mug. So this is a little better, and we can mess around with this angle down here at the bottom. I think that'll be a good shape. So let's go with this handle here. Grab another tool. This is the glaze cup. That is an extremely important tool, and I'll show you why in a second. It has changed how I make handles dramatically, and you'll see why. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reform the top and the bottom so they're in a congruent, symmetrical shape. Just using my fingers, so I have a nice diamond there. Just make sure everything is consistent. So I got two congruent, they're congruent with each other. Then I'm going to go back and roll it again, this time more forcefully because this is fairly dry. The most important thing at this stage is not using a tacky handle. So there's all these finger marks in here, but they're not tacky. If I touch it, there's no new ones are left. So that's an important part. That's a stage when you want to start making your handle. So I'm going to roll mostly just the bottom and the top edge. I don't really care about the inside edge. That's not such a big deal, but you can do it if you want, and you can use the edge of the table to do that. And what this does is it creates separation from the mug, and you'll see what that looks like in a little bit. So that makes me happy. I'm going to take my magic tool mug and make sure there's no brown clay on here. I'm going to use this corner. This is kind of a square cup. Use this corner. I'm going to take handle. I'm going to just go like this. I'm going to go side to side, and then I'm going to also just sort of rub it on there and then push in the corners. And that creates a rounded part, which will then fit the cup perfectly. You can see it fits. I don't have to do any smashing at this point. So I'm going to do the same with the bottom, holding it just on the edges first, rolling side to side while pushing in with my index finger and my thumb. Then I'm going to rub it, making sure you really want to make sure you're not smashing it, because if you smash it, you'll have a dent here and a dent here. And so we want to just be sort of just pushing at the very edges of it. Okay, so now I got a handle, and this will fit the mug more or less. I'm going to have to do some work to get this to match the curve of the mug, but that shouldn't be a problem. So next step, I'm going to stand up, drink a little bit of water. Get out my needle tool. So let's decide which is the top of the handle. I think we're going to go this way. So I'm going to figure out where I want it to be on the mug. I think this makes sense. You don't want, I feel like there's kind of a sweet spot for where the handle should be on a mug. You know, if we have it down here, that's going to be weird to hold, but it actually that could be like an artistic statement. You can certainly justify it. I think having it too high is going to be weirder because there's all this weight. The weight will be imbalanced. I think having a handle too low, even though it might look weird, is going to be more comfortable than having it too high, because the liquid will be in that area. So we're going to not be too experimental with this one. I'm going to make sure it fits. And then this bottom part's going to be the fun part, because I have to make it match. So I'm going to hold it, holding against my body. I'm just going to gently, so you can see this, push down. So I'm forming the edge of the handle. Instead of smashing the actual shape of the handle, I'm really just forming the edge of the attachment to the curve of the mug. Because what you really don't want is a handle that is a shape different from the mug that's going to be pulling off as it dries and resisting, trying to go back to its original shape. So that's on there pretty well. Maybe want to push this down a little more. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to form the handle. I really like having a more acute angle on the bottom than the top. And the way I do that is by pushing with my palm. You see how it's creating, this is becoming a sharper angle, and you can get really aggressive with this. You can make it like that. So for me, that is a pretty happy handle shape. Okay, let's answer these questions. How much drying before attachment? What is your approximate step specifically when you attach? This is actually drier than I want. I let these get too dry, but you can still, you'll see I can leave fingernail mark quite easily in there. I often do them wetter than this. I'll try to do them as soon as possible. So yeah, that's the answer to that, I guess. This is unfired at all. This is just greenware. Okay, so now needle tool. I'm going to find where I want the handle on the mug, making sure that it is totally straight, that the top and the bottom line up with each other. And then this is where the rolling the edges comes in handy, because I'm going to hold the handle with my thumb. I'm going to trace around the handle, and not just around it, but inside of it. So I'm going to trace inside the attachment. Holding it on with my thumb. And this part is just a light tracing. That's what we have. So I'm going to go and score this. And the thing I like about this tool is that you can go deeper because it's finer. I really get aggressive. I'll just go nuts in here. You'll see how much scoring I do. I bought one of those sawtooth metal ribs, and I tried it, and I really didn't like it because it doesn't get as deep as this needle tool does. I'll try to get cross hatching going, so I'm really just going nuts, but I'm also making sure I'm keeping my scoring inside of the tracing. Okay, that's pretty good. So that's how it looks. It's pretty deep. I'm gonna take my more beat up sponge. I'm gonna dip it in my water. So I don't want it to be dripping, but I want to be able to touch the scored part and have it fill up with water. Just kind of dab it. And that way the water fills the scored area and doesn't pour out generally, although it is doing it here a little bit. But so you're trying to just keep the water where you want it. Set this down. Take my handle, get the scoring. I'm going to try to leave the beveled edges alone. So I'm going to score inside of that, and you'll see what that looks like. And the cool thing about this is I can go super deep in here because there's no worries about scoring through the wall. Okay, so there we go. That's my thoroughly scored handle. I'm gonna take my wet sponge, kind of dab it on there. You can also dip this into your water cup, but I think just keeping it as dry as possible is good. And also, all these little chunks of clay are going to turn into slip when I attach it. So I'm going to face the mug towards me with the score. I'm going to line up scored part with the handle, attaching the top first. I'm only holding the handle with these two fingers and using my hand on the inside to hold it in place so that I'm not going to deform the mug. I'm going to pick it up, I'm gonna attach the bottom part just by pushing it down right on the scored part of the mug. There's all this slip squirting out, you can see that, and that's totally fine. I'm gonna take my dry-ish sponge, and this is just the corner of the sponge. I just cut this up. The reason I did that is because it has a really nice sharp corner, and that is gonna allow us to clean up all of this really, really nicely. Okay, so now we have a separate handle that's not, you can see it's obviously not part of the mug. It's the shape that I want. If you want to make it a different shape at this point, you can do that part where you smash it in and create a finer angle here. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to take my cleanup sponge and get rid of all these finger marks on here, and you can dip it in some water. Yeah, I'll tell you about the wet box in a minute. So I'm just going to wipe this down. I'm just going to do it until the handle is smooth, and it's popping up here a little bit, so I'll just push it back down. It wants to move, and in doing that, that makes some more slip squirt out. I'm just going to clean that up. It's really amazing how much the sponge can transform a handle. It goes from looking like this lumpy handled piece of clay to this perfectly smooth piece. You can do the insides as well. Flip it over. At this point, I think it takes me about 8 minutes to attach a handle, between 6 and 8 minutes. And if you're doing production work, it's kind of helpful to know how long each step takes, so you can figure out how much you're making per hour or how much you're not making per hour. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. At this point, you can, if there's anything you don't like about it, like I want this to be a little more straight. And then you can test it out and see how it feels. This is 3 fingers now. When it's fired, it'll be a little smaller. My hands aren't super big, so for me, this is going to be a good 3-finger handle. There's room above my finger, so I feel like, make stuff that fits your hand. That's the most important, so you can make sure that it feels good. You can make any adjustments here if you want. You can alter the shape. You can continue to mess with it if you want. Let's call that one done. Okay, let's do another. So I have all these handles here, and I try to pick ones that fit the cup. So this is, does this make sense to have this handle on here? Is that gonna be too big, too small? Ideally, you're being consistent, but I feel like this one. Not everything's perfect, so we'll make this one work. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is make sure my ends are congruent in a shape that I want. So make them nice diamonds in this case. So that's a nice diamond. This one's a little funkier. Okay, and then I'm gonna, so that's how I want it. You can also at this point form the handle to the shape that you want more or less on the table by rocking it back and forth. So this is a little bigger than I want, so I'm gonna make it more like that. I'm gonna roll off the edges. To make that bevel to create separation from the mug body. I'll get my magic cup, start creating the roundness just by pushing the edges of the handle down, making sure I'm not deforming it as I do so. So there's a nice rounded end. And you can see this one is, this other end's kind of funky. It'll get smoothed out as I smash it down. And it's important that this is glazed so that the handle doesn't stick to it. So I have another 2 rounded sides. Okay. So let's figure out where this is going to fit on this mug. Something else to consider is, do you want, this is not consistent. One side is bigger than the other. So do you want the fat side at the top or the bottom? You're going to do the bottom on this one. I have this line in the middle, so I'm going to try to have a handle that makes sense for the form. Using my palm to create a finer or more acute angle in here than here. Just pushing. I think that looks pretty good. And this is going to be a 3.5 4-finger handle, depending on the size of your hands. So yeah, it's probably like a 3-finger handle, really nice and comfortable. So we're going to go take my needle tool and I'm going to trace around. And so first, make sure that the handle's on there straight, that everything is where it's supposed to be. Make sure that it looks good. I feel like this is a little incongruent here, so I'm going to just smash it into place to a shape that I like right now before I do anything I can't undo. Handles on there straight. Take my needle tool, go inside. You don't have to go particularly deep right now. You're just making a gentle tracing. And it goes over here. You can see 2 shapes. I'm going to score pretty aggressively in here. I'm actually going to leave all these little chunks on there as best I can because they'll become slip. So I'm going to do the same. Actually going to take our wet sponge, dab it on there, and clean up any drips so the water is staying in the scored area. Take the handle and score this guy. Aggressively scored handle inside of the bevel, most importantly. Take my wet sponge, dab it on there. All right, so we're gonna the top, use the right in the scored area. I'm gonna, with my index finger and thumb, pretty much my middle finger's down below, but it's not really doing much. I'm just gonna smash it on in place. using my other hand on the inside to make sure, because if your mug is wetter than this one is, you can deform it by pushing in. I'm gonna pick it up and attach the bottom, pushing down with my 2 fingers, just these 2 fingers, making sure it's straight. So let's look at it. Is that straight? It looks pretty good. You can always tweak it, make adjustments. Something else to keep in mind is that is this part in plane with the cup, and I think sometimes that won't happen. So you can just tweak the handle either way to line it up. It's pretty well attached. I'm gonna take my sharp cleanup sponge, go around the edges where the slip squirts out, and that creates a nice, lovely attachment. Do the same for, sorry, you can't see that, for the other side and then the top. Something else this does is it pushes the slip back in. So if there's any cracks, not cracks, but any spaces between the handle and the mug body, the slip you push back in will fill it in. So that's pretty good shape. I think maybe let's just go like this a little bit. And when you do this, this will pull up right in here. So now I'm gonna have to go back and reattach that a little bit. But I really like, you know, an aggressive shape in here. I think that is much more interesting than just sticking the handle on straight. I think that creates a more beautiful piece. Take my wet cleanup sponge, get rid of all the finger marks. Inside and out. Thanks, y'all. Yeah, what makes it crisp and clean is using a sponge. That's like the secret, is use a sponge to get rid of any imperfections. And they're cheap. Keeping your sponge relatively clean is also really helpful, because once it starts getting slippy, it will not clean as well. Okay, now we're going to inspect this. This is a little inconsistent, so we're going to inspect it and we're going to fix it. So, looks like I feel like I've got a little bit of a bump here. I'm just going to press that in a little bit and then push this back down over here. Do a little bit of cleanup. Make sure this is happy. Sometimes I would find myself really doing a lot of cleanup after the fact, and the more you do this, the less cleanup you'll have to do. But you know, you can go in there and really define and refine this edge if you want to make it sharper. If you want to change this area in here, the negative space, you can push in this part. But I think this is a pretty good handle. I'm quite satisfied with that. Let's see how it feels. It's more, yeah, 3.5 finger, probably 3 finger when it's done. That's out of the kiln. So there you go. Is it straight? Yes, it is straight, most importantly. Cool. Should we do one more? That'd be useful. We'll talk about the damp box in a little bit. Make sure to ask me that again later. Have I had any trouble making on classic porcelain? Kind of. Not really. The most trouble I've had with porcelain, the like translucent porcelain, is that I can't get a glaze to look good on it except for a white glaze, because everything else has crazing issues. But the handle is typically stay attached just as well as on B-Mix. I find, actually, let's talk about handles staying attached. I will grab one and be right back. Actually, right here. So, okay. Oftentimes, I find that as these dry, no matter what I do, there will be some cracking around the edge, which is where this tool comes in handy. And I'll just dip it in water. So it's got a little bit of water on it. And I'll go in to where the handle is cracking at the separation and just wet it and push in with some force the crack. And as you push it in, that will push in excess clay into the crack and it will clean it up. And then when you glaze it, it won't be visible at all. So this is a super useful tool for anytime your handles are coming attached. If they come completely unattached, this is going to help you. But if they're slightly cracking, which B-Mix seems to do all the time, it's rare that it doesn't. Even if I let them dry over 2 weeks, it still will happen. And this tool comes in great use. I got this from Clay Art Center in Tacoma. I think it was like $6, and it's priceless. What were we doing? Let's do another handle. Let's do a smaller one. Yeah, let's do a small handle on this one. So let's try to keep it above this line because I don't want to have to deal with having a handle down here. So yes, the normal cup is just a magic, sorry, yes, the magic cup is just a normal glazed cup. This is one that had a bunch of glaze run off and it destroyed the bottom, so I just kept it in the studio. And I just use it. It's smooth and it's not porous, so the handle wet clay will not stick to it. Okay, so this is the last one we'll do. Conform. Got 2 congruent attachment points. The table, roll the edges, so I get that nice bevel. Okay, so we got that. Cool, got our bevels. Gonna take my magic cup, holding more or less just with my 2 fingers, roll it, and then as it rolls a little bit, then I'll start just sliding it, making sure I'm not smashing this part and deforming it. Same with the other side. Cool. So we got 2 nicely curved sides. Now let's figure out the shape I want on my mug. So that is not a bad shape, but it's not a shape that I like. I think it's going to be uncomfortable to hold. It's like a 2-finger max. I think what we can do is make this a little longer of a handle. Sorry, by pushing down and just so, oops, you can see I pushed too hard right here. So I'm just going to bring it back into round, no big deal. I'm going to focus on the bottom, making this more of an acute angle. Okay, so it's going to be probably a 2-finger handle in the end once it shrinks 12%. So we're going to go with that. Cool. Make sure it's straight on there. That's my needle tool. Clean it off on the sponge. Trace inside. try to do this at normal speed. Score deeply. My wet sponge. Get this a little wet. I find my limit for making mugs is about 12. If I have more than that, I go nuts doing this over and over and over again. But you kind of have to do them all at the same time because you can't just have some like semi-dry mugs and some unmade mugs of a different dryness. So you just got to kind of do it. I don't know how anybody is a professional ceramicist making like 30 or 50 things at a time. That drives me crazy. Maybe you guys have some insight into staying sane while making ceramics. Okay, I'm gonna attach this now with my holding the top, pushing it on, find my bottom, pushing it on, slip is squirting out. It's pretty good shape right there. We're gonna take the cleanup sponge, go around. Okay, I'm gonna get a little wetter and really start getting rid of all the imperfections and marks on here. There's like all kinds of stuff on this one, but by the end, it's gonna look great, if I do say so myself. So I think we can pretty much start the Q&A now. If you guys have questions, I think you can unmute yourselves, I believe. Just try to be aware there are other people and try to talk over each other. But yeah, if you got questions, go nuts.
Hi, this is Stephanie. I just typed
Hey.
it in, but I have a hard time keeping my mug and my handle the same, level of dryness. I find that, do you leave your handles to dry for a little while or a day or something before you're attaching them?
For sure, yeah, I'll show you the difference between properly cured handle and a not properly cured handle and a fresh one in 1 second. Let me just get this guy's. Sweet, I like it. Cool. So as I was saying earlier, these mugs got a little too dry. The mug bodies got a little too dry, but I'm able to dry the handles out accordingly with a fan I have back here. I don't know if you can see it, it's a little lower. I'll just set them on this board in front of the fan and just let them dry out. The most important thing is that they're not tacky still. So you can see like this still has all the finger marks from when I made it, which don't matter at all because we just smooth them out. But handling it, it's still super flexible. I can do whatever I want with this handle. This is actually kind of dry, but it's still malleable. That's the most important thing, is that it's still malleable. Whereas a fresh one that I just pulled earlier is like, I could attach this, but it would just be super hard to work with because it's so wet and it's just going to deform anytime you, I don't even know if I'd be able to put this on the magic cup. It would probably just, this is not even really
Do you make them on the same day then as your mug?
No, well, usually not. Usually I'll throw the mugs in one session, and then by the end of that, I'm spent. I need to go do something else, and then I'll come back the next day and make the handles while the mugs dry. After I've cut them off the bats, and then I'll trim the mugs, then trim the mugs the next day, and I trim and attach handles on the same day. So one day is throwing, one day is handles, one day is trimming and attaching. So does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah, it does.
Okay,
Thanks.
cool. Let's talk about the damp box while we are here. Let's angle the webcam down. So it's just a storage box with little latches on it, and in it I have, you can see there's this big hunk of plaster that I got at Georgie's. I think it's like 14 by 17, I think, and it's what I use to reclaim slip into workable clay, but I don't do that anymore, so I just use it as a damp box. And the cool thing about it, like, I don't even know when I made this handle. This is a different clay body altogether, but it's still totally flexible. And I'll take a sponge every once in a while, dip it in a bunch of water, just squeeze it in right on top of the plaster, and that hydrates everything that's in it. And even though the plaster is wet, it doesn't make the attachment points, like the whole handle's the same wetness. It's not wet, and then dry. So that's super useful. All right, hit me with your questions. Any questions, anybody? Someone's got a question. Okay, cool. Well, if you guys don't have questions, I would love to see, I assume most of you guys are on Instagram, I would love to see a before and after of your previous attempts at handle making and your post this workshop attempts at handle making. Just tag me in it so I can see. I'd love to see anything that you come up with. If you have any other questions after the fact, feel free to unmute all of you guys. Are you guys having trouble unmuting yourselves? Is that a thing?
Hey, Dan, can you hear me? This is
Yes,
Greg.
I can. There we go. I'm trying to unmute
Okay.
everybody one at a time.
So I have a question that I'm sure I'm not allowed to ask, but is that a Shino base on your lovely translucent green and blue and that iron glaze?
This one here? Or the translucent?
Well, I like that surface on that, but your shiny ones that I've seen lately.
This one?
Yeah, that's
This?
the stuff right there.
All right, you guys paid, so I'm gonna tell you what this is. I don't normally tell people what my glazes are. This is two Georgie's glazes. One is, so I first dip it in their zinc-free clear and let that dry. I make sure it's really thin because if it's thick, the second glaze will not show up as much. And the second glaze is Scotch pine. And Scotch pine doesn't look great on its own. It's kind of like gross green color, but with the two, you get the cool like bubbles, and it reminds me of like gummy worms or something like chewy and delicious. So yeah, that's
yeah, that's the best surface I've seen on a smooth piece of pottery in a long time.
Yeah, I do like it, and I have such trouble finding glazes that look good consistently, and this never runs. Like I've maybe once gotten it to run on a super long soak at like cone 6, but it's like a no-brainer glaze, and it works on pretty much most of the B mix like white bodies. I switched to like this is Georgie's version of B mix, which is called white salmon old hickory, And this actually is a little more accepting of glazes than the Laguna B mix. This is actually not B mix. This is also the same one, but I find B mix is a pretty reliable, decent clay body that's not going to give you a lot of problems with running or with pitting or weird glaze faults and stuff like that. So.
That satin sheen is a really beautiful glaze too. I really like that surface.
Which one? This one?
That one, yeah, that satin.
Yeah, I'll show you guys something crazy. So I was making these wood grain mugs, and right when I bought this is the same glaze. When I bought it, it was super thick in the bucket, and so I dipped it, and it was just like unbelievably thick. And I don't know if you guys can see the detail on here, but it did this like crazy psychedelic like running thing, but it pulled the mug apart. It cracked it. I don't know if you can see that. It cracked it, just like it just cracked it across the body of the mug entirely. I've never seen it before. I think it was just too thick. The mug couldn't handle it. But yeah, it's super cool glaze. That's called Scotch Pine. Or no, it's not. It's Copper Patina from Georgie's. And I, for a long time, just used coyote glazes, but this glaze is awesome. Only on this clay body. On other clay bodies, it doesn't work well. It's like a total crapshoot. But on the white salmon, old hickory, they have it does some really cool things, and is lovely in my opinion. So
that happened to me with old copper from Laguna. Okay. I lined the inside of B-Mix with colonial white and the outside with the copper from Laguna. It looks exactly the same, like a little bit matte, and it caused daunting on a ball.
Okay, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think with this specific glaze, as long as it's not super thick, it'll be fine. When it's thin though, it looks really crappy. So you have to have the right thickness to get the color.
And this is the one that you use the clear first and then this one?
No, that's this one. This is the Georgie's Zinc Free Clear under Scotch Pine from Georgie's as well.
Oh, okay.
Do you dip your pieces, or are you painting them on?
No, I always dip. I pour the inside and then I dip the outside. I'll just stick my hand in it and dip it in, making sure that it doesn't run over the edge into the mug, which happens occasionally. It happened today. I feel like an amateur when that happens, but yeah, just be really careful with your hand inside and dip it in.
You use reduction or oxidation firings?
Always oxidation, because I'm using electric. So I'm
Yeah.
not doing any soda firing or anything like that, because that takes way too much effort and time. And I want to just set it and forget it, and then come back and have Christmas morning as I open the kiln without actually having to do the work of staying there and making sure everything is firing properly.
Fair enough.
I kind of got tricked into making glazes. It's kind of how I feel. I was searching for a clear, and it turned out the best one was the one I made.
Well, hey, yeah, if you
which
can
is
do
Hansen's 20 by 5.
Yeah,
I spent a lot of time doing that. In fact, I had a professional potter tell me that his line that he heard from someone else is, if you ever want to slow down a potter, teach him how to start making his own glazes.
Yeah.
Because you can spend your whole lifetime doing that. So,
and that's why I haven't done
great
it.
effects on yours. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks. Yeah, that's why I haven't made my own glazes, is because it's just, I don't have the time or not so much the time, but the patience to do 1,000 test firings. And I'm trying to make stuff that I can sell that people like, and I don't want to make a bunch of seconds that end up, in the garbage pile. So yeah, I do have a lot of seconds though.
Yeah, I don't have to try to make those. You're right. They just kind of happen.
Yeah, they sure do.
This has been great. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie.
Absolutely.
You guys have any other questions? Feel free to.
Yeah, this is going to be great. I literally took a picture of my handle progression since about 2006. They all look exactly the same. It's always the same shape. It's that ear shape, the half a heart looking one, as my dad says.
Yeah, I think the most important thing.
Great.
the most important thing in my experience is just being really aggressive and not being afraid to throw something out and to make something that looks bad. Just, you know, try something new. Yeah, just really just go for it. And if you're not if you see something that you like that someone else is making, try to reverse engineer it and make your own version of that. And that's how I figured out these handles. I watched other people's demos, and then in fact, I'll tell you guys the demos that I've watched that I found really helpful. And just the one person whose handles these are based off of never did a demo or has not done a demo that I've seen. So I had to figure out what he did to make the handle. So if you guys want to write these down, these are all available on Instagram at some point in the past. Danny Meisinger has a great handle demo. Highly recommend that. Isaac Howard has a really good handle demo. And the first person whose handles I started trying to imitate was Kevin Kowalski's, and his handles are not it's similar, like a lot of similar steps to this one, and when you see it you'll see the similarities, but Dallas Wooten's handles are the ones that I'm trying to mimic with these, as his older handles from about a year ago. And you'll see when you look at them, they're just absolutely stunning and beautiful. I'm not quite there yet, but his stuff is really amazing, and it's what sort of pushed me in this direction with a really fat attachment point, with like this being really fat and then the inside being thinner.
Hey, Dan, I don't want to step on your recommendations too much, but I got to tell you, Pete Pinnell had a really good talk about what goes into making a good mug. And it was amazing to hear him talk about how a really bad handle can, of course, spoil it, but also a really aggressive, nasty handle makes that mug so much more interesting to him. As long as it fits the mug, it can have spikes and everything on it, but it makes him pay attention to the mug when he drinks, because he has to be a little careful. I thought that was a great perspective.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I've had that experience. Pete Pinnell, Pinnell.
Correct. It's a Charlie Cummings gallery
video
from when he was judging a cup contest for Charlie.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll check that out.
I think Eric has something he typed over to you.
Oh, I'm not looking at that. Let me pull that up. Okay, can I? Yes, let me open that. How do I open this? Okay, that handle there is the Kevin Kowalski method. But yeah, ask away. Ask me a question about that handle, Eric, if you want. But yeah, that's before I figured out this this technique, and that required cutting off the ends of the handle. And one thing I got from Isaac Howard's demo was using the cheese cutter to trim. It's not that one. To trim the edge. If the handle is too big or too long, you can use this tool to slice off the end of the handle, so you have less material and it becomes a smaller space once you remove, you know, that much of the handle. So, Eric, did you have a question about that handle that I didn't answer? Okay, great. Anybody else have any questions before we wrap this up?
How long will the video be up for?
I think indefinitally.
Oh, great.
Yeah, the one from last time is still up. I will ask that you don't share it with anybody, as this is, I don't want to say intellectual property, but you know, this is like my product.
No, absolutely. The reason I ask is just be able to go through the attaching methods.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
do this up and do that.
Feel free to watch it while you work, and you know, stop and go back and all that.
How do we get it?
I'll send you a link to it. It's not. I end the meeting and then it sends me the link, and I'll send it to you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, cool. Well, thank you all very much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I had a good time. If you have any questions, you can just email me after the fact. I'll do my best to answer them. And please shoot me a before and after. I'd love to see that on Instagram if that is something that you are doing. So cool. I will say goodbye. Thank you all again.
Bye.
This has been excellent. It's good to hang out with you guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye, you too.
Good job.